Morning, everybody. Today we are going to talk about Ezra chapter 9. Chapter 9 and chapter 10 are the last couple of books of Ezra. But Ezra and Nehemiah are kind of a continuation of the same book. They actually were the same book. It was called Ezra and Nehemiah for a long time. But chapter 9 dives into some some interesting ground, right? So chapter 8, Ezra finally gets to Jerusalem, and they get settled in and everything. Beginning of chapter 9, some people come to Ezra and say that the people, the Jews that are there, have not kept the commandment of God, and they have intermarried into the lands of the people. They've given their sons and they've given their daughters to the people of the land to be married off, and so he literally says the holy race is no longer pure, right? This distresses Ezra pretty bad. Bad enough that it's one of the most I wouldn't say horrific crash outs, but it kind of is for a single character with no violence. He rips his outer garment. He, like, if he was wearing a jacket, he would rip it, or ripped his jacket, ripped his shirt, and pulled out some of his hair on the top of his head and pulled out some of his beard, and just sat there crying, right? Sat there weeping, appalled. And he sat there fasting all day, after he heard this news. And then we see one of the most, probably one of the most heartfelt prayers in the entire Bible come out of chapter 9. And Ezra goes into this plea with God to help, to help them really come back from this course. And he starts by saying, exclaiming how amazing God is and how awesome God's steadfast love is for his people, and how we as people have sinned, right? So he does these things, and it continues on even to say that, like, we've broken your law, we've broken your commandment, the commandment that you told us not to give our sons or our daughters to their people because of how it would happen. They would little by little have their values eroded away, and this land would no longer be our land. And there's a lot of people say that the Bible is an old book and we can't really draw parallels from today, but we're kind of along the same lines right now. If you really look at our nation, if you really look at our world, the more godless we become, the more, corrupt as a nation we become, the less morals we have. And it's all because we've sacrificed a little bit and given a little bit, and, given a little bit and given a little bit and given a little bit. And, we end up losing ourselves. And I mean, he says it pretty plain and clear in Ezra chapter 9, and it's really difficult. So, it's a really hard chapter. It's a really difficult chapter to read through, and I strongly encourage everybody to go through it. Really sit down and read it, and you can look at it from that perspective, or you can look at it from a perspective of our sin, and how we marry into this idea of appeasing our flesh, and because it's easy, right? These Jews at the time were saying, or they went there, they were supposed to wait, and really slowly rebuild the temple and really slowly rebuild Jerusalem. And from the beginning of Ezra to the end of Ezra was only about 70 years. So it didn't even take them a whole generation before they started to break their own commandments again, right? So it's interesting how quickly we forget, how quickly we lose track of time, and we lose track of everything that God has done for us, and we just we do it better. We say we can do it better. We can't actually do it better. but we think we can, and we think we know better than God, so we just ignore the parts of the Bible that we don't want to deal with, and we just drive on. And it's horrible for us as a people. We can't keep that life up. So yeah, Ezra chapter 9, really powerful, really strong stuff. In Ezra chapter 10, we see the conclusion about, what they do about this, right? What they do about this whole intermarrying issue, which is a really hard one as well. But we'll cover that next time. Love you guys. Have a great day.